What's going on, guys? Welcome back into another episode of Money Moves, and we got a lot of stuff moving this week. There is a lot going on globally, a lot going on domestically, a lot going on in the stock market. We're going to talk a little bit more about big news today, potentially another war breaking out between Iran and Israel, and how does that impact your investment portfolio and some of the opportunities that might come from it. We got a big port strike. How does that impact our import-export, ideally our economy as a whole? We got Hurricane Helen. We've got politics updates. We've got big reports coming out this week with jobs reports, unemployment, all kinds of stuff. So let's just go ahead and dig in on the top of the docket here.
Yeah.
First, let's start with this war. Right now, the stock market pulled back pretty significantly today.
I wouldn't say pretty significantly. That was actually a pretty muted reaction, in my opinion.
'Kay.
It's pulled back quite a bit further without geopolitical risk.
Yeah.
So I really don't. That was a nothing burger to me. I would, if that was a big, one of the things we can look at is oil. Oil was up by about $3 a barrel, and if that was something that was actually of concern, and this is as of now, future events could hold their own merit. We would have seen oil go up by $10, $15 a barrel.
Yeah,
and the VIX would have been trading around the 25, 27 zone, and I think it barely touched the 20s and traded in the high teens.
Yeah, it was high teens. Looked like oil jumped back above $70 a barrel as investors begin pricing in potential supply disruptions in the Middle East.
We've already reviewed it. We don't think there's going to be one barrel lost.
Okay.
Yeah, in production, it's actually going to do absolutely nothing.
Now, in terms of,
in our opinion,
this war potentially escalating, we saw this last week. Biden Harris admin gave $8 billion to Ukraine in additional funding, $8.7 billion to Israel, over $450 million to Taiwan. So we've got a lot more money going out the door. And then
not a lot of money going to North Carolina, South Carolina,
and I was going to say, and we just had a pretty historic natural disaster, over 1,000 still unaccounted for. Hundreds of the death toll in the hundreds now.
It's probably going to be
millions still without power. A lot of issues going on, and a lot of people upset. I mean, I'm seeing memes all over, the internet that, maybe the state should rebrand to Ukraine, and therefore we'll get some more funding and support sent over immediately to help, the citizens of those states. I mean, the South is hurting in a big way right now.
Yeah, and always in the back of your head, you always wonder if they're slow on getting the boots on the ground there because of how those states tend to vote. But with all that aside, I've heard that should, not that this is a good thing, but they're expecting the death toll to surpass Katrina.
Yeah, it's pretty sad.
So that's pretty.
I mean, some of the videos are shocking.
Insane. It's insane. It's just because it's so dry there. They're not used to having that much water.
Yeah.
And it's the coast, it's the East Coast. And that all happens, at that same time as we have this port strike. And that's kind of a wild combination of events as well.
Well, let's shift over to the port strike to give you guys a little history here so you guys can understand kind of the backstory as well as what's currently going on, and just ultimately how this can trickle into our economics and impact not only your investments, but more so our economy as a whole.
Yeah, I definitely have an opinion.
Over 50,000 port workers across the United States are now officially on strike for the first time since 1977. These ports handle nearly 40% of all U.S. imports, and it could cost, according to, I think it was JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, a bunch of, big economic firms essentially said it could cost the U.S. up to between $4 and $5 billion per day. So what does this mean for the economy? There is an interesting thread here, and I'm just going to kind of read through it for you guys. We'll unpack it, get your thoughts and opinions on this. Now, for background, Port workers are on strike because of failed contract negotiations. And in June, the ILA, which is a union that represents port workers, suspended talks with the United States Maritime Alliance. On September 30th, the contract officially expired without a deal. The current ILA contract has union members making a range of $20 to $37 an hour. Depending on seniority, a longshoreman can make between $150,000 and $250,000 annually under current contract terms. Port Insider said that the ILA is targeting an increase larger than 32% over 6 years. Now,
62.5 to be specific.
That's a relatively decent price increase. And what the argument is, right, is we have one of the most inefficient and our technology is lacking in terms of automation, efficiencies, and that's something that obviously the longshoremen don't want the technology, artificial intelligence, automation to replace them and lose their jobs. I see both sides of the equation here, right? But when you think about an increase larger than 32% over 6 years, right? That's something that, people are sharpening their pencils on. Roughly 38% of all U.S. imports are currently processed through the East and Gulf Coast ports. Now, when we see what they are thinking is going to be a projected strike of potentially up to a week, if it gets past a week, it starts getting a little hairy. This is where we start to see, and, again, there's arguments to be made that it'll flush itself out, but up to potentially $20 billion this strike could cost if it goes up to 5 days. Now, agriculture is an industry that is heavily reliant on East Coast ports. 2.67 million metric tons of soybeans are imported through these ports in 2023. Also, 1.95 million metric tons of poultry were imported there. Food inflation could rebound again if the strike lasts longer than, a couple days, right? Now, here are some of the top U.S. importing companies through the East and Gulf Coast ports. Just so you guys know, the West Coast ports are still open right now. Yeah. Walmart leads the list along with other large retailers like IKEA, Home Depot, Dollar General, and Amazon. Yet another sign that this strike could lead to some inflationary pressures from some of those large retailers. Now, export markets are also heavily reliant on these ports as well. China receives 1.91 million metric tons of exports from these ports, and Indonesia receives 1.3 million metric tons. Various countries around the globe are going to feel the impact from this strike as well. Now, each year, more than 3.8 million metric tons of bananas arrive at the ILA-handed ports, or 75% of the nation's bananas, nearly 90% of imported cherries, 85% of canned foods, 82% of hot peppers, 80% of chocolate arrive through these ports on the East and Gulf Coast ports. So obviously, if this doesn't get resolved quickly, there's going to be some ripple effects felt through, some of these supply chains. Now, this brings us back to, and there's a chart that I'm looking at, essentially, could this port strike, along with an aggressive Fed pivot, spike a rebound in inflation as seen in the 1970s? In 1974, inflation rose to near 8% before falling back below 2%, only to spike back to 10% in 1980. This is what the Fed is trying to avoid, seeing that some of these historic strikes have led to some inflationary measures and some supply chain issues. What are you seeing, and what are, the conversations that you're hearing, or maybe what's your opinion around how this strike could be a factor in what could contribute to additional market volatility, in addition to the potential wars that we're seeing? Not even potential wars, the wars that we are seeing, the election that we're walking into right now. Now this port strike, Fed rate cut cycle has begun, potential inflationary pressures. What are your thoughts? How does this tie into volatility and what we're going to see in the market?
Hell yeah, here we go. Well, here we are at the beginning of October, and we have a very similar beginning of September, market-wise, where we kind of started with some volatility. I think investors should definitely expect volatility going into the election. We are 35 days or 34 days away from the election as of today. I might be a little.
I'm looking.
Help me. So I expect choppiness.
35 days.
35 days. Thank you. So, what should investors look at? Well, I think we have earnings season. Well, I don't think we have earnings season coming up this Friday, kind of kicking off. To cushion that, analysts have pulled back, or I would say undershot industrials and consumer discretionary stocks, kind of giving them a layup to beat their earnings and cause positive momentum to be forced into the market. So I expect that to show itself. Will that push through or be strong enough to subside the election? No, because it keeps going. It appears on the front end to be very tight. Is it as tight as we're being told it is? I don't know. I'm not so sure, but I don't know. Moving on to the strike, ILA.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I want them to get a raise, and I feel that. And they're basing that 32% number off the other port workers that just settled with their union and got their 32% increase over a 5-year period or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I believe today the president was offered, today I mean Tuesday, was offered a 50% increase by the union, like on paper, and he denied it and said that they want their full 62%, and the language in there is not good enough, and blah, blah, blah. So I try to take a step back and maybe play devil's advocate in situations like this. Here's what I'll say. The guy that's the president, he makes about $200,000 a year as the president of the ILA. I think the average compensation for their workers is around $87,000 a year. They're about making $90,000 a year. That increase will be most felt by that person, and I feel like the president is kind of being a jackass a bit and not compromising enough. Getting a 50% increase, it's better than was already offered. It's not necessarily what you're asking for, but I feel like he's putting his foot in the ground maybe a little bit selfishly, because that pay increase would also directly affect his compensation. That's my opinion. I would take the 50%. It's not fair right now to the people on the East Coast that are dealing with the other natural disasters, and the fact that they're being purposefully kind of blind to that fact and kind of pushing forward full steam, that's a little bit
well, they know they got a lot of leverage.
They do to an extent.
I mean, when you hear some of those kind of shocker headlines that we're talking about, $5 billion a day, potentially $20 billion impact on the economy.
We can really quickly, within a couple weeks, get all the goods or the majority of those goods from Mexico and South America. We just aren't. So I don't know if they really want to. I think that would FAFO pretty quick.
Yeah.
I think those people would find out what would happen. There's a fine balance, right? They're pushing back to get compensation, and the union is giving them, in my opinion, a fair offer. They're pushing back even harder and kind of proving to me that they're willing to be unreasonable. What I think is going to happen is they're going to get what they want in the short term, and they're gonna spite themselves and cut themselves off at the nose because they got so greedy in the short term. They're just going to say, you know what, we'll give them what they want now so we can keep business rolling. Let's start that automation and roll that out in the next 5 years.
Yeah, that was my thought, right? They're going to essentially have to pay them,
yep,
give themselves enough runway to backfill the automation and technology in a way, unless the contract is
and that guy
written in a capacity that doesn't allow them to do that. But
yeah, respectfully, their president just doesn't look like the most educated person. I don't think he's smart enough to get out of his own way, and nor do I think he cares what happens in 5 years. So that's my opinion on it. I think they're gonna push too hard. They're gonna get what they want in the short term, and they're gonna lose out in the long term. And that's really the sad thing is, typically compromise is the healthiest way forward for both parties. Both parties can get a little bit of what they want. Both parties are slightly dissatisfied. We used to call that a Chinese negotiation, and that was PC. I don't think it is anymore, but I'm going to call it that. That's good. The fact that when you're given concessions, though, and you kick them, that's not a great place to put yourself, and that's not a position of power, I don't think. I think it makes you look stupid. So I hope ILA and their union settles. I think they will settle very quickly. I think they're going to get what they want, or very close to what they want, which is ultimately going to not get them what they want in the long run. It's going to force automation into that industry, because what they're going to say is they're going to do this again in 5 years. Because what are they doing right now?
Yep.
So we have to automate and get rid of some of these jobs because we have to save the money, and they're going to shoot themselves in the foot.
Now, inflation concerns are starting to kind of come back into the conversation. Potential port strike, rising oil prices, aggressive Fed rate cuts.
I don't think that that's an issue. We just have too much global deflationary. Every central bank around the world, and I literally mean every major, let me put that in there, is cutting interest rates. Loosening up of the monetary policy, not only domestically but internationally, is only going to further move the dollar, euro, yen, yuan, whatever currency is being traded in.
Yep.
And ultimately, no matter how much anybody wants to talk about it or say it's going to change, the majority of those transactions settle in U.S. dollars. By far still, well over 90% of them. So I don't see that happening. I think people, just like they said what has happened to this point for the last 2 years couldn't and shouldn't, and I don't agree that it shouldn't, but it did. We're in a different market environment than the past, and the past is good to learn about what could happen, but is not indicative of what will happen. And so I don't think we're going to get a spike up in inflation, and we're seeing pricing and other data points in the market reflect that. Friday is a big deal because I think payroll data now is the king of all reports, and we also have ISM coming out on Thursday. So if we can get a combination of a expanding or on par ISM, that's the Institute for Services on Manufacturing, I think is what it is. But we want our manufacturing index to be above 50%. It's at 51.4. I think it's supposed to be 51.7 or higher. If we can get that in combo with good non-farm payrolls, private and headline, and then Thursday and Friday we start to see earnings roll in before and after the bell, that should carry through to next week to give us some good momentum that at least will carry us through the next week. Choppiness is what I'm expecting, though. Big up days, some big down days to follow with profit taking through and up into election day until we get some clarity on what's going to happen.
Well, speaking of election day and elections, as you noted, we are about 30, depending on when you're listening to this, 35 days until voting day. A new Gallup poll shows Americans identify as Republicans more than Democrats for the first time in decades, going back to the 80s. I also think it's probably a little bit more of just more people feeling more aligned with American first policy versus, some would call it communism, socialism, globalism, whatever you want to call it. I think that's probably playing into it a little bit right now. We also have seen a lot of, leadership not step up in ways that Americans need them to step up for. We've also seen a lot of people leaning towards, what are we looking at here? What are you showing me?
It's the last 5. The last 5 polls that came out. Washington Post, Trump 50, Harris 48. Emerson, Trump 49, Harris 48. These are as of Monday this week. North Carolina, Trump 49, Harris 48. North Carolina again through insider advantage. The last one was Quinnipiac. Trump 50, Harris 49. Quinnipiac again, Georgia. Trump 50, Harris 45. All of them are leaning that way. You'll still see a lot of major medias telling you that Harris. I think they're showing that Harris has a 1 to 2 point average spread. I think it's going to come down to Pennsylvania, really, because I think if Trump gets Pennsylvania, it's popular vote or not, he'll have the electoral votes to get around 280 plus, and that's more than enough needed to secure the White House. So if you go to like polling sites, it'll show that who's polling better. Oh, well, Kamala Harris is. But if you go to electoral maps, it's going to show you Trump wins because the swing states are leaning at this point towards
swing
Trump.
States are closer than they've ever been before, if not flipped in certain areas.
And in Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, Trump was there, and Kamala Harris and Biden have still yet to show up.
Well, and they're
the debate is tonight, by the way. The vice presidential debate is tonight. I forgot to mention that. So that's going to be very important.
Yeah, that hasn't even been discussed, right?
Sorry, I forgot to mention that.
Vance and Waltz are...
Trust me, I will be ready for I'm ready for that.
Yeah, I am as well. Very interested to hear.
Breathing.
America is becoming less woke per The Economist, with analysis finding that woke opinions and practices are on the decline. Many big corporations are doing away with DEI policy, DEI committees altogether. So that's very interesting. It seems like you would think,
Zelensky met with Trump.
I did. I saw that last week. I thought that was funny. You're like, that wasn't on my bingo card.
What? I think
he's making his rounds, man. He knows...
And I feel like that those people are meeting with him because they feel like there's a very good chance this is
They're covering their ground, their
Correct.
bases, right?
Correct. I was actually pretty shocked to see the Zelensky one.
Well, you see many states scrubbing certain non-verified citizens off of their voter lists. We're seeing that in conservative states. And then you see, just as of yesterday, Gavin Newsom signed in a bill making it illegal to ask for ID to vote in the state of California, which is just insane. I mean, you literally have to show an ID and match it up next to your Costco card to get into Costco.
And that's literally not a joke. They even scan it now by the door.
Like, it's more, they vet you more to go in to buy goods from Costco than they do to vote for our American president, which is just insane.
Yeah.
This last week, Kamala Harris made her first border visit in 3.5 years. Very interesting timing around that. Maybe it has to do with a report from the deputy director of ICE who testified before Congress. Patrick Leitner sent to Congressman Tony Gonzalez over 662,000 illegal immigrants. Out of the 15 million that they've got documented, 662,000 illegal immigrants with criminal histories are currently on ICE's national docket, specifically 13,000 who have been convicted of murder, 15,000 convicted of rape, and 425,000 other convicted criminals of various crimes. I mean, at the end of the day, this is why people care about the protection of our border, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not that people care about immigrants coming over. It's coming over through the due process.
Yeah, quite the
opposite. And what we're seeing with many of these individuals getting transplanted into communities that don't have the proper infrastructure, don't have the proper resources, don't have and it's now not only can they not help those people, they're not able to support the actual citizens of those communities, right? Yeah. Elon Musk made an interesting tweet recently, and this is ultimately why I believe in having a big part of why I believe having borders. This is, you talk about singular issue voters. The border is front and center for a lot of people, right? And very few, and this is quote Elon Musk, very few Americans realize that if Trump is not elected, this will be the last election. Far from being a threat to democracy, he is the only way to save it. Let me explain. If even 1 in 20 illegals become citizens per year, something that the Democrats are expediting as fast as humanly possible, that would be about 2 million new legal voters in 4 years. The voting margin in the swing states is often less than 20,000 votes. That means if the Democratic Party succeeds, there will be no more swing states. Moreover, the Biden-Harris administration has been flying asylum seekers who are fast-tracked to citizenship directly into swing states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Arizona. It is a surefire way to win every swing state and therefore every election going forward. America then becomes a one-party state and democracy is over. The only elections will be the Democratic Party primaries. This already happened in California many years ago following the 1986 amnesty. The only thing holding California back from extreme socialism and suffocating government policies is that people can leave California and still remain in America. Once the whole country is controlled by one party, there will be no escape. The only, everywhere in America will be like the nightmare that is downtown San Francisco.
If you've never been, you have to go. It's insane. It literally, you can see people that look like they're lifeless. And people call them zombies, but I mean,
they look
like zombies. There's people with like exposed bone, skin open, tent cities that rival LA. So I mean, it is wild.
Well, and again, I don't think this is, for me, this is not a Democrat or Republican election. This is literally America versus anti-American policies. Yeah. And I am voting 100% based on that. I don't care if it's Trump. I don't care if it's J.D. Vance. I don't care who is honest.
Zaboomafoo.
No, it is so anti, against what the left is doing, that is what's swaying my vote. And there's a lot of issues on this political docket that mean something, and mean something in a very big way outside of just your finances, right?
Correct.
And so that's where, I think it's a very important election to just be paying attention to and to be listening to everything that's going on. I thought it was interesting this last week. Far left billionaire George Soros is working on buying 220 plus radio stations before the election. The Odyssey Radio Network, which reaches 165 million Americans. And why is the FCC allowing him to do it in an unprecedented move? What they did was they essentially, what would be a very long, tenuous process, they expedited into a couple weeks, which is unheard of, and in their words, unprecedented. FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr is bringing this to light in a House Oversight Committee meeting last week, noting that it is a violation of the FCC's most basic rules against monopolizing interests, right? When you think about totalitarian governments, dictators, number 101 of the playbook is, one, you control the media, whether that's the newspaper now in the world, right, we live in, social media, and then you suppress free speech. We've been hearing, I don't know how many times I've heard of, well, your First Amendment right doesn't matter if you're spreading misinformation or if you're being dangerous or a threat to democracy. They're using some of these words for reasoning why they should be able to censor free speech, or even what we're hearing now more and more of is change the Constitution. The Constitution is outdated.
Yeah, except it's not, because it's an evergreen type document. It's
to prevent against
basic,
government overreach of
basic.
What we're seeing in some of these suggested shifts that are coming out of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, the only thing that's outdated is some of the language and words, how they're used, but the principles and what they're driving forward are eternal. Government should not have more power than is needed. They're there to monitor and act as the guardrails, but the bowling ball does not need the guardrails to knock down the pins. It just needs them to keep it on track in case it goes too far left or right.
Yep.
When somebody told me that, I was like, that's a very good idea on government. You don't need more help than you need.
Yep.
The problem is when you start getting too much help, then you turn into the person, go grab that little thing at the bowling alley, since we're on that analogy, and push the ball down the little dragon tail.
Yep.
And see if you get a strike. You won't get it because you're getting too much assistance. You have to be able to have a little bit of risk of going into the gutter to get that strike.
Yep. This last week, there was an additional intel that was released, according to an informant, that Trump's plane is the next target for assassination. 9 heat-seeking surface-to-air missiles have been smuggled into the U.S. for this purpose. Department of Homeland Security has been notified of it, and they said they are taking the necessary measures to prevent that. Again, just wild times. I saw it was, I forget what it was.
Like Grand Theft Auto election.
It was, somebody had mentioned something that I just thought, like, the way they said it was really good. It was essentially around, here's what it was. It was, I really have to tell all of the Zoomers and younger generations, politics is not usually like this. Presidential elections are not usually like this. Usually they're kind of boring. Multiple assassination attempts, sitting presidents dropping out, nuclear war threats, one party trying to lock up the other candidate. There's never been anything like this. And when you think about it, it's like there really hasn't.
No,
this is unprecedented.
It really is. And it's telling the people that are doing it are all the same people that just they're so obsessed and hate one person. It's so crazy that one person could live rent-free in your heads and have so much power over your and influence over your
it's crazy
ability to be a basically good human being.
Yeah. Well, I did see some interesting news come out. New York City Mayor Eric Adams has been indicted on federal charges. There's all kinds of reports coming out around him and him, potentially stealing and getting bribes and $10 million in taxpayer funds and all different kinds of things. I think the timing of it is very interesting.
Yep. You're allowed to play in the dirt until you try to get clean. They don't want any of their... He pushed back against the...
We're not taking any more migrants. That's what he said.
Yep.
And then within days, he all of a sudden had all these interesting reports coming out about him after he kind of went against the Democratic Party.
Yeah, all those reports could have came out prior to him. It's the timing is... It seems to be coincidental, and we all know that it's not.
Yeah. Yep. Well, the Diddy files are continuing to...
Did you see Costco came out and said, we don't sell baby oil?
Yeah.
I'm not kidding you, bro. I'm
and,
sorry.
And why...
That one got me.
Why would the feds confiscate all of that baby oil? Like, they have no need for it.
I could spend
unless
15
it's
minutes
like got drugs
about,
in it, and that's what they're using to drug people. And
if you want Alice in Wonderland, we can go down the baby oil.
Oh man,
I would be like, first of all, I couldn't amass. If you gave me the mission, I don't even know where to go. They don't even carry.
We
that
buy
amount.
it in bulk from Costco. They're like, nah, man.
Every store around here you could go to. There's not 1,000 bottles. There's not 1,000 bottles of baby oil in my zip code. I guarantee it. So like to even know that you have that many, that is so. I want to know. We need to get to the bottom of the fluid ounce average. Were they 8-ounce bottles? Were they 12-ounce bottles?
Yeah.
Because we are really. This is why this could be a rabbit hole. But anyway, it's impressive. It's crazy. And how ironic. It's like, I feel like he's going to take down a ton of people with him.
Well, I saw a lot of, he wants to take the stand, which is unheard of. Like you want to take the stand, that's dangerous for himself, right? Like to incriminate yourself. But then on the other side of it, when you think about potentially, and there was a list that came out. Now, it doesn't mean everybody on the list, is doing and participating in bad things. There were a lot of people that went to his parties that were like, yeah, you didn't stay past 1 o'clock. Like everybody knew that, right? But then there's obviously a lot of people on the list that were participating. Dots are getting connected. Another 100 women came out today that are represented by an attorney group that essentially are stating they were either trafficked or drugged or taken advantage of. It's getting wild, but there are a lot of celebrities. I don't know about you guys, but I just don't fucking trust Hollywood anymore. I'm like, not that I ever did, but I'm like disgusted by it. I don't even know why we idolize a lot of these people that don't really do anything good for our population, our society. They don't make people better. They actually influence and, sway and move people in ways that are not productive to American values or to those individuals' best interest or themselves. And I got my popcorn ready. I want to see this shit bust wide open. I really do.
Me too. And I feel like, I feel like a gossip girl, but
we're just like gossiping today.
I heard some of the Kardashians are heavily
they're tied into it as well.
Yeah.
The Kim Kardashian's or Kris Kardashian, the mom, her boyfriend was Diddy's like right-hand dude for a long time. Supposedly Kim Kardashian is tied into that world and Kris Kardashian is as well. There's a lot of weird. I feel bad for all the Bieber
Bruce
stuff.
Bruce was like, I see this forecoming. I'm going to give me my get out of jail free card. I am a woman.
Yeah, man. I don't know.
Bruce Jenner, probably probably the only person I can think of that I would love to ask questions to, because I feel like he'd be open with me.
Yeah, he seems like a pretty normal trans person.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
that's the type of
he's
person.
He's a conservative trans person.
And you know what? I don't agree with that choice for my family.
Yep.
But he runs.
He's not rubbing in everybody's face.
No, and you know what, man? Do your thing. Whatever that is. I don't know what it is, but you're doing it, and you're not involving me, and I couldn't be happier.
Yep. 100%.
Got a little TMZ there.
There we did. Well, as we continue to track reports, what the remainder of the week has in store, be sure to follow Mr. Breedwell on Twitter. I know you're always putting some stuff out there. We're obviously on all of our socials, and we're going to be tracking a lot of this. Really, the port strike is a big one. The war is a big one. And, of course, the jobs reports this week is going to be big data that we'll be tracking as well. Yep. So if you guys want to take advantage of the X-Ray, don't forget to connect with Mr. Breedwell and his amazing team, X-Ray to 844-447-1555 to go through your portfolio with a fine-tooth comb. If you're not on my deals list yet, text the word deals to 844-447-1555. We'll see you guys in next week's episode.
Cheers, y'all.